Section 79 of Reviews by Oscar Wilde. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Cricket. Reviews by Oscar Wilde. Edited by Robert Ross. Section 79. Some Literary Notes 2. Woman's World, February 1889. The various collectors of Irish folklore, says Mr. W. B. Yeats in his charming little book Fairy and Folk Tales of the Irish Peasantry, have, from our point of view, one great merit, and from the point of view of others, one great fault. They have made their work literature rather than science, and told us of the Irish peasantry rather than of the primitive religion of mankind, or whatever else the folklorists are on the guard after. To be considered scientists, they should have tabulated all their tales in forms like grocers' bills, item the Fairy King, item the Queen. Instead of this, they have caught the very voice of the people, the very pulse of life, each giving what was most noticed in his day. Croker and Lover, full of the ideas of harum-scarum Irish gentility, saw everything humorized. The impulse of the Irish literature of their time came from a class that did not, mainly for political reasons, take the populace seriously, and imagined the country as a humorist's Arcadia. Its passion, its gloom, its tragedy, they knew nothing of. What they did was not wholly false. They merely magnified an irresponsible type, found oftenest among boatmen, carmen, and gentlemen's servants, into the type of a whole nation, and created the stage Irishman. The writers of '48 and the famine combined burst their bubble. Their work had the dash as well as the shallowness of an ascendant and idle class, and in Croker is touched everywhere with beauty, a gentle Arcadian beauty. Carleton, a peasant born, has in many of his stories, more especially in his ghost stories, a much more serious way with him, for all his humour. Kennedy, an old bookseller in Dublin, who seems to have had something of a genuine belief in the fairies, comes next in time. He has far less literary faculty, but is wonderfully accurate, giving often the very words the stories were told in. But the best book since Croker is Lady Wilde's Ancient Legends. The humour has all given way to pathos and tenderness. We have here the innermost heart of the Celt in the moments he has grown to love through years of persecution, when, cushioning himself about with dreams, and hearing fairy songs in the twilight, he ponders on the soul and on the dead. Here is the Celt, only it is the Celt dreaming. Into a volume of very moderate dimensions, and of extremely moderate price, Mr. Yeats has collected together the most characteristic of our Irish folklore stories, grouping them together according to subject. First come the trooping fairies. The peasants say that these are fallen angels who were not good enough to be saved, nor bad enough to be lost. But the Irish antiquarians see in them the gods of pagan Ireland, who, when no longer worshipped and fed with offerings, dwindled away in the popular imagination, and now are only a few spans high. Their chief occupations are feasting, fighting, making love, and playing the most beautiful music. They have only one industrious person amongst them, the leprechaun, the shoemaker. It is his duty to repair their shoes when they wear them out with dancing. Mr. Yeats tells us that near the village of Ballysodare is a little woman who lived amongst them 7 years. When she came home she had no toes, she had danced them off. On May Eve, every 7th year, they fight for the harvest, for the best ears of grain belonged to them. An old man informed Mr. Yeats that he saw them fight once, and that they tore the thatch of a house. Had anyone else been near, they would merely have seen a great wind whirling everything into the air as it passed. When the wind drives the leaves and straws before it, that is the fairies, and the peasants take off their hats and say God bless them. When they are gay, they sing. Many of the most beautiful tunes of Ireland are only their music caught up by eavesdroppers. No prudent peasant would hum the pretty girl milking the cow near a fairy rath, for they are jealous, and do not like to hear their songs on clumsy mortal lips. Blake once saw a fairy's funeral, but this, as Mr. Yeats points out, must have been an English fairy, for the Irish fairies never die. They are immortal. Then come the solitary fairies, amongst whom we find the little leprechaun mentioned above. He has grown very rich, as he possesses all the treasure crocks buried in wartime. In the early part of this century, according to Croker, they used to show in Tipperary a little shoe forgotten by the fairy shoemaker. Then there are two rather disreputable little fairies, the Cluricaun, who gets intoxicated in gentlemen's cellars, and the Red Man, who plays unkind practical jokes. The Feargorta, man of hunger, is an emaciated phantom that goes through the land in famine time, begging an alms and bringing good luck to the giver. The Water-sheerie is own brother to the English Jack-o'-lantern. The Lananshee, fairy mistress, seeks the love of mortals. If they refuse, she must be their slave. If they consent, they are hers, and can only escape by finding another to take their place. The fairy lives on their life, and they waste away. Death is no escape from her. She is the Gaelic muse, for she gives inspiration to those she persecutes. The Gaelic poets die young, for she is restless, and will not let them remain long on earth. The Pooka is essentially an animal spirit, and some have considered him the forefather of Shakespeare's Puck. He lives on solitary mountains, and among old ruins, grown monstrous with much solitude, and is of the race of the nightmare. He has many shapes, is now a horse, now a goat, now an eagle. Like all spirits, he is only half in the world of form. The Banshee does not care much for our democratic levelling tendencies. She loves only old families, and despises the parvenu or the nouveau riche. When more than one Banshee is present, and they wail and sing in chorus, it is for the death of some holy or great one. An omen that sometimes accompanies the Banshee is an immense black coach, mounted by a coffin, and drawn by headless horses, driven by a Dullahan. A Dullahan is the most terrible thing in the world. In 1807, 2 of the sentries stationed outside St. James's Park saw one climbing the rails, and died of fright. Mr. Yeats suggests that they are possibly descended from that Irish giant who swam across the Channel with his head in his teeth. Then come the stories of ghosts, of saints and priests, and of giants. The ghosts live in a state intermediary between this world and the next. They are held there by some earthly longing or affection, or some duty unfulfilled, or anger against the living. They are those who are too good for hell and too bad for heaven. Sometimes they take the forms of insects, especially of butterflies. The author of the Parochial Survey of Ireland heard a woman say to a child who was chasing a butterfly, "How do you know it is not the soul of your grandfather?" On November Eve they are abroad and dance with the fairies. As for the saints and priests, there are no martyrs in the stories. That ancient chronicler Giraldus Cambrensis taunted the Archbishop of Cashel because no one in Ireland had received the crown of martyrdom. "Our people may be barbarous," the prelate answered, "but they have never lifted their hands against God's saints. But now that a people have come amongst us who know how to make them," it was just after the English invasion, "we shall have martyrs plentifully." The giants were the old pagan heroes of Ireland, who grew bigger and bigger, just as the gods grew smaller and smaller. The fact is, they did not wait for offerings. They took them vi et armis. Some of the prettiest stories are those that cluster round Tir na Nog. This is the country of the young, for age and death have not found it, neither tears nor loud laughter have gone near it. One man has gone there and returned, the bard Oisin, who wandered away on a white horse, moving on the surface of the foam with his fairy knave, lived there 300 years, and then returned, looking for his comrades. The moment his foot touched the earth, his 300 years fell on him, and he was bowed double, and his beard swept the ground. He described his sojourn in the land of youth to Patrick before he died. Since then, according to Mr. Yeats, many have seen it in many places, some in the depths of lakes, and have heard rising therefrom a vague sound of bells, more have seen it far off on the horizon, as they peered out from the western cliffs. Not 3 years ago a fisherman imagined that he saw it. Mr. Yeats has certainly done his work very well. He has shown great critical capacity in his selection of the stories, and his little introductions are charmingly written. It is delightful to come across a collection of purely imaginative work, and Mr. Yeats has a very quick instinct in finding out the best and the most beautiful things in Irish folklore. I am also glad to see that he has not confined himself entirely to prose, but has included Allingham's lovely poem on the fairies. Up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen, we daren't go a-hunting for fear of little men. Wee folk, good folk, trooping all together, green jacket, red cap, and white owl's feather. Down along the rocky shore some make their home, they live on crispy pancakes of yellow tide foam. Some in the reeds of the black mountain lake, with frogs for their watchdogs, all night awake. High on the hilltop the old king sits, he is now so old and grey, he's nigh lost his wits. With a bridge of white mist, Columkill he crosses, on his stately journeys from Slieve to Rosses, or going up with music on cold starry nights, to sup with the queen of the gay northern light. All lovers of fairy tales and folklore should get this little book. The Horned Women, The Priest's Soul from Lady Wilde's Ancient Legends, and Teig O'Kane are really marvellous in their way, and indeed there is hardly a single story that is not worth reading and thinking over. The wittiest writer in France at present is a woman. That clever, that spirituelle grande dame, who has adopted the pseudonym of Jip, has in her own country no rival. Her wit, her delicate and delightful esprit, her fascinating modernity, and her light, happy touch give her a unique position in that literary movement which has taken for its object the reproduction of contemporary life. Such books as Autour du mariage, Autour du divorce, and Le Petit Bob are in their way little playful masterpieces, and the only work in England that we could compare with them is Violet Fane's Edwin and Angelina papers. To the same brilliant pen which gave us these wise and witty studies of modern life we owe now a more serious, more elaborate production. Helen Davenant is as earnestly wrought as it is cleverly conceived. If it has a fault, it is that it is too full of matter. Out of the same material a more economical writer would have made 2 novels and half a dozen psychological studies for publication in American magazines. Thackeray once met Bishop Wilberforce at dinner at Dean Stanley's, and, after listening to the eloquent prelate's extraordinary flow and fund of stories, remarked to his neighbour, "I could not afford to spend at that rate." Violet Fane is certainly lavishly extravagant of incident, plot, and character, but we must not quarrel with richness of subject matter at a time when tenuity of purpose and meagreness of motive seem to be becoming the dominant notes of contemporary fiction. The side issues of the story are so complex that it is difficult, almost impossible, to describe the plot in any adequate manner. The interest centres round a young girl, Helen Davenant by name, who contracts a private and clandestine marriage with one of those mysterious and fascinating foreign noblemen who are becoming so invaluable to writers of fiction, either in narrative or dramatic form. Shortly after the marriage, her husband is arrested for a terrible murder committed some years before in Russia, under the evil influence of occult magic and mesmerism. The crime was done in a hypnotic state, and, as described by Violet Fane, seems much more probable than the actual hypnotic experiments recorded in scientific publications. This is the supreme advantage that fiction possesses over fact. It can make things artistically probable, can call for imaginative and realistic credence, can, by force of mere style, compel us to believe. The ordinary novelists, by keeping close to the ordinary incidents of commonplace life, seem to me to abdicate half their power. Romance, at any rate, welcomes what is wonderful. The temper of wonder is part of her own secret. She loves what is strange and curious. But besides the marvels of occultism and hypnotism, there are many other things in Helen Davenant that are worthy of study. Violet Fane writes an admirable style. The opening chapter of the book, with its terrible poignant tragedy, is most powerfully written, and I cannot help wondering that the clever authoress cared to abandon, even for a moment, the superb psychological opportunity that this chapter affords. The touches of nature, the vivid sketches of high life, the subtle renderings of the phases and fancies of society are also admirably done. Helen Davenant is certainly clever, and shows that Violet Fane can write prose that is as good as her verse, and can look at life not merely from the point of view of the poet, but also from the standpoint of the philosopher, the keen observer, the fine social critic. To be a fine social critic is no small thing, and to be able to incorporate in a work of fiction the results of such careful observation is to achieve what is out of the reach of many. The difficulty under which the novelists of our day labour seems to me to be this: if they do not go into society, their books are unreadable, and if they do go into society, they have no time left for writing. However, Violet Fane has solved the problem. The chronicles which I am about to present to the reader are not the result of any conscious effort of the imagination. They are, as the title page indicates, records of dreams occurring at intervals during the last 10 years, and transcribed, pretty nearly in the order of their occurrence, from my diary. Written down as soon as possible after awaking from the slumber during which they presented themselves, these narratives, necessarily unstudied in style and wanting in elegance of diction, have at least the merit of fresh and vivid colour, for they were committed to paper at a moment when the effect and impress of each successive vision were strong and forceful on the mind. The most remarkable features of the experiences I am about to record are the methodical consecutiveness of their sequences, and the intelligent purpose disclosed alike in the events witnessed and in the words heard or read. I know of no parallel to this phenomenon, unless in the pages of Bulwer Lytton's romance entitled The Pilgrims of the Rhine, in which is related the story of a German student endowed with so marvellous a faculty of dreaming that for him the normal conditions of sleeping and waking became reversed. His true life was that which he lived in his slumbers, and his hours of wakefulness appeared to him as so many uneventful and inactive intervals of arrest, occurring in an existence of intense and vivid interest which was wholly passed in the hypnotic state. During the whole period covered by these dreams I have been busily and almost continuously engrossed with scientific and literary pursuits, demanding accurate judgment and complete self-possession and rectitude of mind. At the time when many of the most vivid and remarkable visions occurred, I was following my course as a student at the Paris Faculty of Medicine, preparing for examinations, daily visiting hospital wards as dresser, and attending lectures. Later, when I had taken my degree, I was engaged in the duties of my profession, and in writing for the press on scientific subjects. Neither had I ever taken opium, hashish, or other dream-producing agents. A cup of tea or coffee represents the extent of my indulgences in this direction. I mention these details in order to guard against inferences which might otherwise be drawn as to the genesis of my faculty. It may perhaps be worthy of notice that by far the larger number of the dreams set down in this volume occurred towards dawn, sometimes even after sunrise, during a second sleep. A condition of fasting, united possibly with some subtle magnetic or other atmospheric state, seems therefore to be that most open to impressions of the kind. This is the account given by the late Dr. Anna Kingsford of the genesis of her remarkable volume, Dreams and Dream Stories. And certainly some of the stories, especially those entitled Steepside, Beyond the Sunset, and The Village of Seers, are well worth reading, though not intrinsically finer, either in motive or idea, than the general run of magazine stories. No one who had the privilege of knowing Mrs. Kingsford, who was one of the brilliant women of our day, can doubt for a single moment that these tales came to her in the way she describes, but to me the result is just a little disappointing. Perhaps, however, I expect too much. There is no reason whatsoever why the imagination should be finer in hours of dreaming than it is in hours of waking. Mrs. Kingsford quotes a letter written by Jamblichus of Agathocles, in which he says, "The soul has a twofold life, a lower and a higher. In sleep the soul is liberated from the constraint of the body, and enters as an emancipated being on its divine life of intelligence. The nobler part of the mind is thus united by abstraction to higher natures, and becomes a participant in the wisdom and foreknowledge of the gods. The night time of the body is the daytime of the soul." But the great masterpieces of literature and the great secrets of wisdom have not been communicated in this way, and even in Coleridge's case, though Kubla Khan is wonderful, it is not more wonderful, while it is certainly less complete, than the Ancient Mariner. As for the dreams themselves, which occupy the first portion of the book, their value, of course, depends chiefly on the value of the truths or predictions which they are supposed to impart. I must confess that most modern mysticism seems to me to be simply a method of imparting useless knowledge in a form that no one can understand. Allegory, parable, and vision have their high artistic uses, but their philosophical and scientific uses are very small. However, here is one of Mrs. Kingsford's dreams. It has a pleasant quaintness about it. The Wonderful Spectacles. I was walking alone on the seashore. The day was singularly clear and sunny. Inland lay the most beautiful landscape ever seen, and far off were ranges of tall hills, the highest peaks of which were white with glittering snows. Along the sands by the sea came towards me a man accoutred as a postman. He gave me a letter. It was from you. It ran thus: I have got hold of the earliest and most precious book extant. It was written before the world began. The text is easy enough to read, but the notes, which are very copious and numerous, are in such minute and obscure characters that I cannot make them out. I want you to get for me the spectacles which Swedenborg used to wear, not the smaller pair, those he gave to Hans Christian Andersen, but the large pair, and these seem to have got mislaid. I think they are Spinoza's make. You know, he was an optical glass-maker by profession, and the best we ever had. See if you can get them for me. When I looked up after reading this letter, I saw the postman hastening away across the sands, and I cried out to him, "Stop! How am I to send the answer? Will you not wait for it?" He looked round, stopped, and came back to me. "I have the answer here," he said, tapping his letter bag, "and I shall deliver it immediately." "How can you have the answer before I have written it?" I asked. "You are making a mistake." "No," he said. "In the city from which I come the replies are all written at the office, and sent out with the letters themselves. Your reply is in my bag." "Let me see it," I said. He took another letter from his wallet and gave it to me. I opened it and read in my own handwriting this answer, addressed to you: "The spectacles you want can be bought in London, but you will not be able to use them at once, for they have not been worn for many years, and they sadly want cleaning. This you will not be able to do yourself in London, because it is too dark there to see well, and because your fingers are not small enough to clean them properly. Bring them here to me, and I will do it for you." I gave this letter back to the postman. He smiled and nodded at me, and then I perceived, to my astonishment, that he wore a camel's hair tunic round his waist. I had been on the point of addressing him, I know not why, as Hermes, but I now saw that he must be John the Baptist, and in my fright at having spoken to so great a saint, I awoke. Mr. Maitland, who edits the present volume, and who was joint author with Mrs. Kingsford of that curious book, The Perfect Way, states in a footnote that in the present instance the dreamer knew nothing of Spinoza at the time, and was quite unaware that he was an optician. And the interpretation of the dream, as given by him, is that the spectacles in question were intended to represent Mrs. Kingsford's remarkable faculty of intuitional and interpretive perception. For a spiritual message fraught with such meaning, the mere form of this dream seems to me somewhat ignoble, and I cannot say that I like the blending of the postman with St. John the Baptist. However, from a psychological point of view, these dreams are interesting, and Mrs. Kingsford's book is undoubtedly a valuable addition to the literature of the mysticism of the 19th century. The Romance of a Shop, by Miss Amy Levy, is a more mundane book, and deals with the adventures of some young ladies who open a photographic studio in Baker Street, to the horror of some of their fashionable relatives. It is so brightly and pleasantly written that the sudden introduction of a tragedy into it seems violent and unnecessary. It lacks the true tragic temper, and without this temper in literature all misfortunes and miseries seem somewhat mean and ordinary. With this exception, the book is admirably done, and the style is clever and full of quick observation. Observation is perhaps the most valuable faculty for a writer of fiction. When novelists reflect and moralize, they are, as a rule, dull. But to observe life with keen vision and quick intellect, to catch its many modes of expression, to seize upon the subtlety or satire or dramatic quality of its situations, and to render life for us with some spirit of distinction and fine selection, this, I fancy, should be the aim of the modern realistic novelist. It would be perhaps too much to say that Miss Levy has distinction. This is the rarest quality in modern literature, though not a few of its masters are modern, but she has many other qualities which are admirable. Faithful and Unfaithful is a powerful but not very pleasing novel. However, the object of most modern fiction is not to give pleasure to the artistic instinct, but rather to portray life vividly for us, to draw attention to social anomalies and social forms of injustice. Many of our novelists are really pamphleteers, reformers masquerading as storytellers, earnest sociologists seeking to mend as well as to mirror life. The heroine, or rather martyr, of Miss Margaret Lee's story is a very noble and graciously puritanic American girl, who is married at the age of 18 to a man whom she insists on regarding as a hero. Her husband cannot live in the high rarefied atmosphere of idealism with which she surrounds him. Her firm and fearless faith in him becomes a factor in his degradation. "You are too good for me," he says to her in a finely conceived scene at the end of the book. "We have not an idea, an inclination, or a passion in common. I am sick and tired of seeming to live up to a standard that is entirely beyond my reach and my desire. We make each other miserable. I can't pull you down, and for 10 years you have been exhausting yourself in vain efforts to raise me to your level. The thing must end." He asks her to divorce him, but she refuses. He then abandons her, and availing himself of those curious facilities for breaking the marriage tie that prevail in the United States, succeeds in divorcing her without her consent and without her knowledge. The book is certainly characteristic of an age so practical and so literary as ours, an age in which all social reforms have been preceded and have been largely influenced by fiction. Faithful and Unfaithful seems to point to some coming change in the marriage laws of America. Citations 1. Fairy and Folk Tales of the Irish Peasantry. Edited and selected by W. B. Yeats. Walter Scott. 2. Helen Davenant by Violet Fane. Chapman and Hall. 3. Dreams and Dream Stories by Dr. Anna Kingsford. Redway. 4. The Romance of a Shop by Amy Levy. Fisher Unwin. 5. Faithful and Unfaithful by Margaret Lee. Macmillan and Company. End of section 79. Some literary notes 2.